Morning.
Morning.
I have we're going out on YouTube right now. So, good morning everyone on YouTube. And we are here. I want to give everyone a chance to see the interview that we had yesterday with Colleen Kubert. And uh, so I'm going to get the link for that in a moment here. Um, Good morning, Art. Nice to see you. And Ava, nice to see you too. We're just getting organized and we will start momentarily. Um, we are live on YouTube, so anything you say uh, will go out on the recording on YouTube. And
Okay, okay.
and you can send me chat messages that won't go out on YouTube within the Zoom system. But if you chat on YouTube, that's at your own risk.
I will
So,
listen.
okay,
I will I will just listen to you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions? Because I don't recall you being with us before, but maybe you were with us yesterday. I don't know.
Yes, I was, and I was so happy to participate in it. It was so fantastic.
Yes, it was a wonderful, wonderful interview, I
Yeah,
really thought.
yes, yeah.
And I'm just going to go out and find that on uh, the channel so I can give people the link
Yeah.
because we had a wonderful interview yesterday with our national goddess, Colleen Kibert. And so let me just get the link to her. Um, okay, that should do it. Okay. Um, I, the reason it's so significant is because she brings together why art, creativity, and psychology are so linked together. And it's very important for everyone to appreciate that because going forward, we have to recognize that we're creating our own world. And it's up to us to be the creators. This is one of the dicta of Carl Jung. And and so we either do that well or we're in trouble. And so,
Yes.
yeah,
I am familiar with this kind of thinking. I have been practicing
right.
myself, so I know how true it is. Yes.
Yeah. And let me just type it into the um, YouTube chat. And there it is. Okay, and I'll give it to you here as well, Eva, on yeah, this is clean interview. Okay, there we go. All right. Um, so you can, I hope after this session, you'll go back and look at that video because Colleen is just publishing her book. And the official launch date is this coming Saturday, February 24th, but she gave us an early discussion of the book and some of her important uh, concepts. And Jordan, I wonder if, and maybe Ava can speak to that also while I go get the electronic copy of the Red Book.
Oh
Yeah,
no, I can't.
go ahead.
Go ahead, Ava. What did you experience yesterday?
I was so happy to see uh, and to listen to her serious, her fantastic process,
Yes,
and it's so and she is so trustworthy. And but I'm thinking of, because I have been trying to motivate people to paint, and it's so hard. So I'm so
yeah,
glad that Tim also feel put in this kind of we don't have to be professional. It's just a personal way of expressing yourself.
right. And I'm going to display that a little bit. I didn't want to do it during Colleen's interview, but I've been working steadily with Colleen and Tim for uh, quite a while now, and with Tim since 2019, and uh, with Colleen
Yeah.
maybe a little earlier. Something like 2016 is what I recall.
Yes,
And
and I have been in dream group with Tim.
oh, you have
So,
been.
yes.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, okay, so this is this is yeah. I know the group. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the leader right now, but um, this is one of the trials of getting older.
Oh, yes.
Uh, but it'll come to me. But in any case, all these things lead us to one central point, which we repeat every week these days, which is Lawrence Jaffe's one sentence. He said, "The purpose of Jung's whole psychology is to make accessible to us that healing power which resides in our unconscious." And
Exactly. Yes.
and that's the significance of what Colleen has taught us, and what we're doing with Colleen, and what I'm now doing, and I'm really convinced of it after several years of working with her. And for those of you who are just uh, joining us, just so you know, I'm going to display my latest uh, status on my two major doodles. One's a really major one, and one is a study. I only have about maybe an hour, half an hour to an hour per day in the morning when I can work on this. And so during the week, I work on a smaller piece, but I'm also working on a major piece, and the smaller pieces are studies uh, for um, for the major piece. The major piece is called Vision of America. It's my vision of America. And I just gave my grandson, he doesn't know it yet because I'm shipping it to him on Monday or Tuesday. His birthday is he's 18 years old next Saturday, so hopefully he'll get it in time. But I had one framed for him. And so anyway, what I'm going to do is, let's see, show you what my status as of today. I'll show you, let's see, some, okay, let me see if I can get into these. Let's see. Yep, okay, it's there. All right, so as of yesterday morning, um, this is where I was on my vision of America. And I'll show you that first. Now, this is after about 5 weeks work. So what you see uh, in light orange is my doodle itself. And that took me 4 weeks working only on Saturdays and Sundays because I couldn't, my wife doesn't like to have this big piece out on her dining room table, but it's 40 inches wide by 25.5 inches deep. And so it's quite a large piece. It took me 4 weeks just to do the doodle before I put any color in it, with just a couple of exceptions. One is the dark, it looks in this vision almost black cell in the upper left corner, which I saw that cell and I thought of it as evil. And then my psyche told me to paint it. Purple Lake is the color that I used. And one of our psychology friends, Judith Oakland, said, evil always comes out first, and it's important to get it out. And so then a week or two after that, the Purple Lake leaked away from the cell up into the upper left here. And so now it's starting to look like the snake in the garden. And I was going to ask Colleen what I should do with this evil snake that's in the garden of my major piece here. But I've decided not to. And what I've decided to do instead is to simply avoid it as much as I possibly can, and let fate determine what I should have around it in the end when the end comes. So this was yesterday, except for the Purple Lake. These were the colors that I put into it in the first Saturday morning that I worked on it. And this took about 2 hours, believe it or not. It takes a fair amount of time to do this properly. And then today I took it somewhat further. And so you can see that I've done my best to avoid the evil cell here.
Oh.
What is your comment, Ava?
No, I'm just looking. It's I used to be afraid of the snake, of course, because of my name.
Right.
But I think I have been a little bit more familiar, and it was good that Colleen had her toes on the snake. So maybe you of course, my first reaction is maybe you will be able to touch
what
with
occurred to me.
toes. Yes,
And
but you have to go. You have to go your own way. Of course, it's
of doing it. Yes. And so what just came to my mind, and I'm going to do this now, is that I have a facing cell right here that's facing this snake. And so I'm going to put orange in that because I
some fire or a firewall, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I my heritage is Dutch, okay, or at least the predominant part of it that we always point to. It's also Welsh and Swedish and Pennsylvania Deutsch, which is German, of course. But my paternal grandfather is descended, and I'm therefore descended from one of the first 5 of 150 European settlers of Manhattan Island.
Mm.
And so we think of ourselves as of Dutch origin. And of
Oh,
course, the house of the Dutch monarchy is the House of Orange. And so uh, the orange, cadmium orange is the chosen color. Uh, I'll use that in that cell to face off the evil. That only just
oh,
came to me as I'm looking at it right now. Um,
yes. But you are thinking a lot. You are planning. I'm doing it just spontaneously when but you are really planning your doodle.
well, I'm doing it as spontaneously as I can. So in other
Oh,
words,
okay.
that idea of putting orange in that cell, this cell right facing the evil, only came to me just now. It came from my unconscious. And
Yes.
so my unconscious told me to put it there, so I'm going to put it there. And
Yes.
so that will be my orange cell facing off against the evil of
Mm.
that shape. And it was a shape that emerged in this doodle spontaneously, entirely spontaneously. And as soon as I saw it, I said, "Oh my God, that's evil." And before I finished that session, which was like my second session of working on the doodle, I decided to paint it Purple Lake. And then it was after that that Judith Oakland reminded me that, when evil emerges, you need to figure out a way to control it. So I'm not thinking um, to put the orange in. It just came to me as I put this on
Yeah.
on
Mm.
the screen. And so this is about so the doodle took me about 4 weeks of mornings. It took 14 and a half hours because I'm keeping track of my time. And the color on it so far, as of today, and most of this was done today, is 4 hours so far that I've got into this so far. 4 hours plus 14 and a half. So I originally thought it might take 40 hours. I think now it's going to take about 60 hours or thereabouts. And so then my study number 4, which I also am working on during the week, is this one, and
Mm.
this is 16 by 20,
Mm.
and this is as far as I've progressed that one. This is a week's work, basically. Um, and and so again, I'm trying to go entirely based on what my unconscious tells me to work on. I do I do have a mark, which is what Colleen taught us to do 4 or 5 years ago. Yesterday, we put into the chat the link to a a playlist of the sessions that we did with Colleen in 2020 before the election, when we were trying to decide what we would what was going to happen in the election, and we all did doodles, and even before that, maybe a year or two before that, I had started to doodle according to Colleen's dictum, and or it may have been in 2020, I guess, during that session, those series of sessions, we did about 8 or 10 sessions with her, and this mark of mine emerged. And I'm not going to tell you the rules that my mark have because I don't want to misguide your unconscious because my mark is not your mark, and everybody is going to have a different mark.
Yes.
So what I can say about this is that this is my mark 4 years on, somewhat developed. And I know in my heart now that nobody can copy my mark. Okay, because I know the rules. And and so it would be impossible to copy my mark. And I'm actually going to challenge Tim, because there's a show of artificial intelligence art at the Whitney Museum in New York between now and June, which is mentioned in Smithsonian Magazine. So I'm going to tell Tim, let's put our art in. Our Tim is very worried about artificial intelligence and what it will do to us. And I don't believe that artificial intelligence can copy us.
No.
And
but it was so in Sweden there was a decision to cut off art education because there was because of that the motivation was that AI could do the work, so much of such kind of work, and it's so maybe
I'm now teaching school, and I started to joke last year that after the 8th grade we should just give all the kids smartphones and tell them, say good luck to you. Let them learn, teach themselves. But I think more or less we'd get to the same place. And but my point is that I don't think either Tim or I would accept the work of an artificial intelligence that's trying to copy us, because Tim has a very special style, which is called the dancing world. And among others, he has several styles that he does things in, including his sculpture. But his paintings, called the dancing world, are very unique to Tim Holmes, and I don't think anybody can copy that either. And no artificial intelligence can, but that's just my opinion. And so let's see, I will see if I can put my finger on, it's not that one. I think, yes, here's the one. This was my first study. This piece I actually gave to my grandson. He doesn't know it yet, but he will have it on Saturday. And I was doing this piece. It's small. It's a 7 by 10, and I had it framed for him with the purple surround. But what I was working on this, the idea of Vision of America came to my mind. And so it's from this piece that the whole idea of what I'm doing now with my Vision of America came. And the point is, I work in a school that it's very heavily Black children. It's about 80% Black, maybe even more, a higher percentage. And they're children who have had rough lives. There's one whose mother disappeared recently. There's another whose father is in prison. There's another who, have lost relatives to the drugs. And so these children are seriously traumatized. And one of the things that traumatizes them is the fact that they're Black, and they're very focused on that issue. And I don't see the black and white at all. This is what I see of America. Okay, this is my vision of America. And so that's what caused this to come to my mind. I painted this maybe 3 weeks ago, and it just spontaneously came to my mind. Oh my goodness, this is my vision of America. And and what happens here is that there are very many faces that emerge in my work here. And let me just show you a couple that I think are pretty amazing. And they show up on their own. Right here, this green space has a long head with an eye here, an eyeball, and a dark of an eye, and the mouth. Can you see that? Can you see that, Jordan? Can you see
Move your cursor again?
Okay, so this is the front of the face. There's the bottom of the nose. And then this is the chin and going up. And so here's the eyeball right here with the pupil of the eye right there. And that I made no effort to include that. It just appeared. And here you can see kind of a skull that's frowning, a green skull. And if you were to study this piece, and this is only 7 by 10, you would probably find about 50 faces in it, and maybe more. So anyway, I've been looking at these things for quite some time because I was using Colleen's technique of Rocky since April of last year. And I happened to have had at that time an art class. I was teaching art for 3 months, and never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I was going to be an art teacher. But I visited Colleen last year during my spring break, and during that visit, she was telling us about Rocky, which is covered in her book. And so I went back and I had my entire student body, 650 children, do a Rocky, which is 24 feet long and 42 inches high. And every child in the school touched it. And it was unbelievable how exciting it was. And we've done another this year with my current school. Maybe I can show you. Let's see if I can show it to you quickly. A lot of stuff here, so bear with me for a moment.
I can see you have a very good quality on your colors. So they are so clear.
Yeah, and that's important. I've really seen the value of having good quality watercolors. In fact, I'm even going to go up level to professional watercolors now. I'm currently using Winsor Newton Cotman watercolors, but oh gosh, okay, we don't need to see my whole my whole year, but anyway, let's see, months. Okay, let's see, go back. Maybe I can do it quickly this way. Okay, this is all right. May. Well, I'm sorry to drag everyone through this. Nope.
Yes, art Tim's
yeah, this is Tim's water bear that he did
Yes,
a year
yes,
ago for our Confluence night,
yes.
2022. And it's a very nice piece. In fact, I have one. I have number 3 of the series. Let's
Oh,
see. It was intended as an award for Colleen, so she got number 1 in the
oh, okay.
series.
I have been at the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, but didn't look for Tim's. Is it constantly in the
Well,
Hermitage?
I don't know where it is in the galleries in Hermitage now, and because his show was in 1993, so it was
Okay,
31
maybe it's
years ago. Uh,
okay. So,
so he had a one-man show there, and
uh-huh.
they devoted an entire gallery to his work, and then the Hermitage decided to keep some of his work, and
Yeah.
so that's in their
They have
collection.
over 360 million or million things. It's so big. It's
Oh
so
yeah, it's huge. Um, so Susan Mason on the comments here, who is an artist friend of ours and often comes here, said, "You would not believe what I see in this. I just screenshot it to zoom in, and I cannot believe what I see. I don't want to tell because I don't want to influence it at all. I look forward to seeing it when it's complete." Okay, I think she must be talking about the large piece that I was showing, but it could have been any of them. Okay, so now I have to find what happened to what happened to, oh, okay, I've got the red book. And Jordan, did you want to make any comments here? I'm
I was just
gonna,
listening to you and Eva going through. Thank you.
yeah. Okay, so we're up to around footnote 68 in Scrutinies. And so I need to see if I can get myself to Scrutinies now on this copy, which is,
Actually, one comment actually that comes to mind now. Jung made a curious statement. I don't know in which text or if it was in a lecture, but he said the reason for evil in the world is that most people cannot tell their stories. So it
yeah,
seems to
it's
be
repressed.
a repression,
Yeah,
so that that which is avoided will dive in and come back stronger and more malicious, as it were.
yeah,
So I think that there's I suspect then that really evil is not divine in origin, it's human in origin, and that if someone is stuffed down so hard that they will come. I mean, what's the old quote of a child who is not given the community's love will grow up to burn the town down? I mean,
yeah. And
and that
that's what's frightening about the student body of my school. It is
well,
that
because they're trying to find responsibility. They can't find it inside because they've never been given any. And then since they've never been given any, they don't know how to take it, to take
yeah,
responsibility and have it. So, I mean, there's a point where, stop playing the victim, but there's also a point where they don't know anything else. So they can't typically. So,
okay. So there's I've found the page now, and I'm going to show it to you momentarily. Just need to make sure that I know where I am. Okay. All right. So in the hardbound copy, if you have a copy, I'm on page 502, And on this copy, I'm on page 427 in the copy that is the electronic copy that some people have downloaded. And so what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to share my screen so that everybody can see what I'm talking about. And I'm going to back up a little bit because where we are, where we stopped is actually so I said, but I want to go back because Jung and his soul are having an argument, basically. They're having an argument in Scrutinies. So this is page 502 of the reader's edition of the Red Book by C.G. Jung. And it's on this electronic version that I have, it's 427. And so here, I'm going to take it back to where Jung is criticizing his soul. And he says, "Yet," I exclaimed, you lie insufferably. You possess not only that marvelous thing that belongs to me, but you also have access to the gods and eternal fullness. Therefore, surrender what you have stolen, liar." Now she was vexed and replied, "How can you? I no longer recognize you. You are crazy, even more. You are laughable, a childish ape who extends his paw toward everything that glitters. But I will not allow what is mine to be taken from me." Then I cried enraged, "You're lying, you're lying. I saw the gold. I saw the sparkling light of the jewel. I know it belongs to me. You ought not take that away from me. Give it back." Then she broke out in defiant tears and said, I don't want to part with it. It's too precious to me. Do you want to rob me of the last ornament? Embellish yourself with the gold of the gods, but not with the meager treasures of earthbound human beings. May you taste heavenly poverty after you have preached earthly poverty and necessity in your humankind, like a true and proper cleric full of lies, who fills his belly and purse and preaches poverty. You torment me awfully, she wailed. Leave me just this one thing. You men still have enough. I cannot be without this very one, this incomparable one, for whose sake even the gods envy men. I will not be unjust, I replied, but give me what belongs to me and beg for what you need from it. What is it? Speak. Alas, that I can neither keep it nor conceal it. It is love, warm human love. Blood, warm red blood, the holy source of life, the unification of everything separated and longed for. Okay, so this soul is asking for Jung's blood, and Jung is resisting, and that's as far as we got last week. But I want to ask if Eva or Jordan has a comment on this.
If
Thank
Eva
you.
doesn't, go ahead. Go ahead, Eva.
I said thank you for introducing me, just because I haven't prepared for this. But I have read the Red Book earlier and listened to your readings also.
Oh, okay.
It's hard. It's in some way, this reminds me of Tolkien, you know, this Gollum thing.
Right. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, there's a famous Jungian analyst who got her PhD by doing a comparison between the Red Book and Tolkien's Red Book, because Tolkien had a Red Book also. And so you can find on the internet, I'm sorry I don't remember her name offhand right now, but she was uh, in the conference that was held at the Library of Congress, where they introduced the Red Book for the first time, when there was a display of the Red Book in 2010, and several famous Jungian analysts spoke at that conference, and she was one of them. And what's his name? The Terrible Love of War. Remind me who the
James
author
Hillman.
is. Hillman, yeah, Hillman was there and was, I guess, the main speaker. But anyway,
What I find interesting, I'm glad you backed up because I didn't see this last week. I'm glad you backed up because I didn't see this last week. But what's interesting is in this last piece of this passage, both he and his soul have devolved to be a petulant 4-year-old throwing a tantrum, except with intellectual concepts. And it's kind of interesting, I think, because I think the devolve before the so I said, and then they start to come back into more of a present place, where they're actually then starting to substantiate instead of just the tennis match of petulant accusations back and forth.
So it's quite an argument that they're having, and they're arguing about she was talking earlier about the need for blood for the ancestors, let's say. And so we need your blood, we need basically your life. And of course they do, because they no longer have life, and so they can't create a new experience within life. So it's up to us to envision what their life meant. And of course, we, according to Jung, are all symbols of all of the ancestry and everything that's gone before. I mean, this was implicit in what Colleen was saying yesterday, that the collective unconscious that's within us in our living form has been formulating since sex was discovered by our single cell organism ancestors. We're all descended from single cell organisms, and so there have been many experiences our ancestors have had over millions of years, hundreds of millions of years, maybe billions of years since life began. And we are the symbols of that, the result of that. And so everything is contained within us. And the question is, how do we access it? So that's why I have focused so much on the art that Colleen has taught us to do, and that I'm now doing, because I want to see what's there, and it isn't necessarily an object that's in the physical world. And so that's why my work is quite abstract. I finally gave up, realizing that I didn't start painting until I was 45. And by that time, the possibility of becoming good at drawing or good at painting, that cow had left the barn. And so it's only recently that I've decided that I can do abstract art, and it will be quite meaningful to me. And so for me, these paintings that I've done are primarily meditations. It turns out that this is, for me, it's a better meditation technique than anything I could get from Buddhism. And my wife is quite a Buddhist. She's taken a 3-year retreat, which is the equivalent of ordination. She didn't take ordination because she's married to me, but
Your video froze.
but Buddhism ultimately is trying to get away from the ego, and as Colleen was saying yesterday, what we're doing, it quite involves the ego and doing things, and so,
And I think actually those are two roads to the same place, because
surely,
I feel like in Buddhism, it's not getting rid of the ego, it's becoming natural, becoming one with nature. And ego strength is, I am nature. I know myself in, and I'm not disconnected from nature.
yeah,
And in that sense, I think there's a giant overlap where they're really both allies, but they don't need to agree to disagree. I think they come at it just completely from a different way, and both arrive at the same place of connection
right
to nature.
right I agree entirely. Ava, how about you? What do you think about this?
Yes, I think so too. And I have been following Tara Brach, her meditations, and she's doing it her way, and I agree with Jordan. It's not the false ego to
Yeah,
yes.
and I'm explicitly saying, what Colleen says and what Jung says in the Red Book explicitly is, don't follow my way. It can be
Yeah.
entirely wrong for you. Find your own way.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, my way as it ultimately emerged, I mean, I've always liked art and bought a lot of art over the years, but this change in me began in 1995 when I visited the Boston Museum of Art and saw a Jackson Pollock piece exhibited. It was drip painting number 31, and it's quite a large piece. And I walked in and looked at it and immediately began to weep. And I couldn't get control of myself. I was weeping for a good 10 minutes before I could even regain my composure. And so ever since then, I've been trying to understand what it was that Jackson Pollock communicated directly from his unconscious to my unconscious without passing either one of our conscious minds. And it took me 20 years till 2016, 21 years before I even understood what caused the weeping. And this friend of mine made a comment at one of my sessions, olive drab, because the colors were reminding him of olive drab, which is a color used in the military. And I instantly recognized that I had failed to properly mourn the loss of my roommate from the basic school, who died 5 months after we graduated from basic infantry training. And I had failed to properly mourn him because I was caught up in my own life at the time. I was on my way to Vietnam also. And I just, didn't have time or didn't think it important. And so anyway, now that I see, and so I was very interested in Jackson Pollock, but I saw another artist who had I'm going to stop this share for a moment. So I saw another artist who had basically done drip paintings and copied Pollock's originals, or he wasn't copying Pollock's originals. He was, and his paintings, although very interesting to me, left me cold. I didn't have the same connection to them as I had to Pollock, and um, so thanks to Colleen and pushing me into this doodle idea, I finally have what I'm doing, okay, which is basically the same idea as Pollock, but I am nature, as Jordan said, I am nature. And so I'm not copying Jackson Pollock. I'm seeking what he saw
Right.
in his painting. And we'll see if I get to number 31 of my Vision of America pieces. But I'm sort of thinking in that way that maybe I'll never get beyond that one idea because it struck me so powerfully a few weeks ago. And
Well, I think what's interesting about that is, do not seek to be like the masters, seek what the masters sought, which is I am nature. And I look at that and, no big hole in my heart. I don't need to be completed or filled. So that 5 words I use are always complete, comma, never finished, comma, lifelong.
yeah.
And I think that gives the, not knowing, it's just course.
Yeah, and I acknowledge that I may well change. Debbie calls me her kaleidoscope because I do change what I'm thinking about, what I'm doing, and so on over my life with Debbie, which is now nearly 40 years. And so she calls me her kaleidoscope. But so I acknowledge that the kaleidoscope may shift, but I think each piece that I do is going to shift like a kaleidoscope. And I've always been enamored with kaleidoscopes probably since I was 5 or 6 years old. And I remember the first kaleidoscope I was shown, which was in the summer of 1952. And it just so happens that I remember where I was when I was shown this kaleidoscope, which was in my grandparents' home in Philadelphia, right before we went to Alaska. And I was really impressed with this thing, and I couldn't put it down for days. I mean, finally, I had to leave it behind because I guess it was my grandmother's kaleidoscope or something, and it was an antique. So there's no chance she was going to give it to me. But I think that's the only reason I stopped looking at it was because my life went on to other things at that time. But I still remember that, and now my paintings are coming out like kaleidoscopes in a sense.
Yes, yes.
And so I'm now making that connection even in this discussion today, right?
Fantastic. And that you could get the connection from Pollack so many years afterwards. That's
Yeah.
so. Oh, thank you for.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that had impressed me was that I was never very emotional in museums. I've been to many. We have the National Gallery here in Washington, and I've been to that many times. And I know that some people get very emotional going through an art museum. And that never happened to me. Never. I mean, I was interested in art. I was interested in studying what artists were doing, and therefore I was visiting art museums all over the world. As far away as Lahore in Pakistan. I've been to the museum there and several museums in Tokyo and so on. And so certain things have struck me. One of them is Auguste Rodin's work, which I was studying even in my high school years. And then I realized early on in my relationship with Tim that much of his work looks similar to what Rodin did. And Tim and I had a day together, let's see, in the spring of 23, I guess. We had a day and we were going to the San Jose Museum together. I said, wow, what an opportunity to go to a museum with Tim Holmes, right, for a day.
Mm-hmm.
And we get there, the place is closed, which is also kind of the story of my life, because I once took my whole family, including my 3 little daughters, to see the Louvre. And it happened to be a Tuesday, and there's a sign on it that says closed on Tuesday. So we couldn't go to the Louvre. But in any case, because we couldn't go, Tim had been telling me about this Rodin garden
Rodin, yes.
at Stanford. It's at Stanford University. And so we went up there, and lo and behold, they have the Gates of Hell, which is sort of Rodin's, pinnacle piece, I guess. And there are 6 copies of the Gates of Hell around the world. And I had seen one of them in Tokyo when I was in high school, because it's at the Ueno Museum of Western Art. And so here was a second one there. And so Tim and I were looking at this, and we've both been inspired by both Rodin and by Vincent van Gogh. We both read the letters of Vincent van Gogh, which is a Penguin classic. It's a classic book of his letters. We don't have the letters that his brother sent to him, but we have essentially all of Van Gogh's letters to his brother. And when I read that, I felt, oh my God, I feel like he's my brother. I know him better now just reading these letters than I knew my own brother. And then when Tim said he had read them, then Tim sort of became my brother too. It's like that.
It's interesting to me, the kaleidoscope. I mean, that's a noun, but with the drip paintings and what you're doing with your doodles, I think to kaleidoscope, it's becoming a Stargate portal verb of you going in, outside. And so it's interesting. I think the verb is or the infinitive, to kaleidoscope. You are actively doing that with your psyche.
Right. And I mean, so Eva, with my doodles, the 4 weeks I spent doing my large doodle, I only let my brush go with the light orange color that I use for the doodle. I only let my brush go where my unconscious told me to take it. And so the whole doodle that took 4 weeks came entirely from my unconscious. And that cell with the evil in it came from my unconscious, and the idea to put purple lake in it came from my unconscious. And now the idea of putting cadmium orange opposite it came from my unconscious just this morning, just as we've been talking here. And now, as I put the color in, it, each time I select a color and how I go about doing it, that's all coming from my unconscious as well. So, and
I find that interesting too. I
Yeah.
find it interesting that you're opposing the purple and the orange, because purple and yellow, blue and orange, purple and
Yes.
orange create brown, living kinds of brown. Now the purple and yellow creates more of a chalky brown, but the purple and orange creates more of a rich red earth brown. And you've avoided using brown on purpose. And I find it's interesting that coming to the opposites, purple and orange make brown, but you're not making brown. You're having the two components of what would make a brown that are in opposition. So I think that's really wonderfully curious.
Yeah. Well, so anyway, so it's a process. I think this painting is probably going to take me another couple of months to finish it. But in terms of listening to one's unconscious, that's what we're all about here. And as Jaffe said, it's the healing power of the unconscious that we're talking about. And if you can connect with that, you're on your way. And of course, Jung himself never explicitly said this. Okay, Jung, he referred to the way. He said, "Don't follow my way because it could be wrong for you." But he never said what he meant by the way that I ever found. And I've read the majority of the collected works at this point, so, and the Black books, and I've never heard him explicitly explain what the way is, but the way is the way of opening the unconscious. That's what Jaffe got it.
Because he also did his painting very personal, and
Yes.
not he didn't try to compare with the way of
Right. And the way of another artist.
I'm Swedish talking, so I have hard with my English sometimes.
Yeah, that's quite understandable. Don't worry.
But it was so he followed his senses or unconscious impulses, and
Right.
not thinking about what. But of course, he was afraid of people's opinion, because this red book took 50 years. He was aware of how it could be misunderstood, as well as Hilma Klint too, and so on. It's so hard. It's like the soul doesn't get come easy to this world.
That is for sure.
Yes.
I appreciate your point there, Ava, about he understood how it could be misunderstood.
Yes.
And in that sense, he kept it in his own man womb so that, the oyster spit fresh flesh kind of would not be influenced, so that he knew better than to subject the identity, this pure raw identity, to anyone else's opinion or even just comment, so that it was his. And I think that's a wonderful, he's in a sense, he's protecting his own solitude, which is a high form of self-love.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you should mention Hilma af Klint, because Colleen is really impressed with her work. And I noticed that yesterday, Colleen is really impressed with this book, Women on the River of Life. And I at this point, I've never made this observation to Colleen, but I think I'll make it now just to put a stake in the sand about it, which is this. When I read Women on the River of Life, I found it very rational. Okay, I found it very almost off-putting to me because I'm looking for the irrational in the world, and Colleen has been working in the irrational basically her whole life, or at least her whole time since that meeting that she went to where she was given a studio. So she was working with the irrational her whole life. And so for her, reading Women on the River of Life just resonates with her very deeply. But to me, I say, oh my goodness, this is a lot of statistics and stuff. This isn't the irrational. This is the rational. And what I see in Klimt's work is a lot of the same thing. She doesn't, or she probably paints from the unconscious from her perspective, or did so, and it was very unusual for her time because she lived 150 years ago or something like that. But I find her paintings to be very very rational with
Yes, I agree.
Strict
I agree. I
and
too.
that sort of
I
thing.
feel it. Yes. There is so geometrical and so on. It's not like Jung. It's not like Jung at all. It's so different.
Right, and it's so different from what Colleen does also.
Yes.
Because Colleen's work comes from the unconscious very clearly, and I'm sure Hilma af Klimt's work came from her unconscious as well. But it was, for her time, that was extremely unusual for a woman at that time to have rational shapes and that sort of thing in her painting. So that was, and I think that's what Colleen is really taken by, is the rationality in it, which is sort of a balance.
You think so? Yeah.
Right. So it's a balance for where Colleen's psyche has been her whole life. And the same applies to the book, Women on the River of Life, which she mentions in her book. And by the way, everyone, I do want to mention Colleen's book. And so I'm going to hold it up here. This is the book. Just let me get rid of my cloaking for the moment. Okay. And don't mind the wall behind me, but anyway, this is Colleen's book, and this is the back cover. And this book is just filled with all kinds of images and beautiful, beautiful images of her work. And many of her drawings, like these are drawings that came out of her visits to China. So you can really understand her process and how she went about doing her work in her style. But what she's giving us here is not, you should like my style, and therefore I'm going to show you my work. It's really the work as illustrative of the psychological ideas that she was bringing forth. And just so as you know, Colleen is 91 years old right now, but this is the beautiful woman that was Colleen 50 years ago in 1974. And
Well, that statement kind of reminds me of the woman sitting on a park bench, and she said, turns around to the little girl, and she said, I used to be young and beautiful. And the little girl says, well, now you're just beautiful.
Right. And I do love in this the story of this painting, which is one of the first paintings that Colleen sold. It's a watercolor. And Colleen thought that she had painted a gate. That's the gate into the unknown, which my wife my wife did a lecture one day on this YouTube channel on the vanishing path. And so this gate, which Colleen did, let's see, in 1960, so 64 years ago, is already showing the vanishing path there, okay, with the gate to the other side, okay? And I haven't brought my wife's attention to this, but so I'll just read a short excerpt here because it's a really amusing part of her book. Around 1960, at about age 28, I took part in my first art exhibit in our little village of Northbrook, northwest of Chicago. My decorative paintings were immediately popular and sold out. One was a lacquered painting, a watercolor landscape about 18 by 24, with an elaborate frame of a road leading to and ending abruptly, with no road continuing beyond, and see-through iron gate, only a rolling landscape beyond. I recall liking the painting myself and thinking that the idea of the road ending at a gate was a rather mysterious one, a good idea for a painting. The painting sold. As the buyer walked away with it, a friend approached her saying, "Oh, you bought a painting. What is it?" The buyer replied, "A chair." And off they went. I was stunned. How could she think such a thing? My clever idea was missed by her, but why? Later, looking at a slide of the painting, I could see how the road to the gate could be seen as the seat of a chair, and a large iron gate could be seen as an ornate chair back. I think this was my first jiggle of consciousness. Something psychological was going on. Why did the buyer see it as a chair? Was her life like the seat of the chair, solid and supportive, or the iron gate her beautiful persona? Or was the painting just a pretty chair, perhaps for her dining room? What was it to me? The road, my still short life, looking beautiful at the gate, but no image of a road leading beyond, only a vast landscape, not yet articulated, no sense of my future. Now, I'm going to show it to you again because I want to tell you how Debbie reacted to this painting. So I showed this to Debbie, and she said, "Oh, that's a couple embracing." And at the top of the gate, you see two things that Debbie sees as two heads, and they're reaching across, their arms are reaching across the top of the gate. And the couple is standing there And I said, well, no, it's a gate. And she said, oh, well, of course it's a gate. And the funny thing is, that's the Buddhist-based lecture that Debbie gave us 62 years later, or 63 years later, in her lecture on the vanishing path. So you can, on this YouTube channel, you can put in into the search the vanishing path and find Debbie's talk. But Debbie, the Buddhist master, missed it too. but Colleen and Debbie were talking about the same thing 62 years apart, or 63 years apart.
The first thing I saw was this dirt road up to the big dark black stone castle.
Uh-huh.
So I mean, I love how that the interpretation of where are you in scale, you know,
Right.
Small scale chair, wandering journey scale. It's a path up to a wrought iron gate. And I've been playing big picture a bunch lately, and I'm like, oh, look at the castle. I mean, so I have to kind of, in a sense, poke fun at myself that then, oh, if I switch scale, shift focus, I start to see the other things after I've been influenced. But the first thing I saw was, oh, I'm walking up this dirt road to the big dark black stone castle.
Uh-huh. Well, it's interesting because in part because Colleen told me this story a few years ago, and I couldn't quite envision how a gate could look like a chair. And so I'm delighted that she put the picture in her book. And so anyway, this book is filled with riches. I urge you to buy it, and you can buy it at colleenkeybert.art. I'll put the link in the chat, and let's see, https://
I did put a link to my daughter because she's working with ceramics, but she is just doing useful things. She's not using her fantasy so much. I don't know if she will look at it, but maybe when she got older, maybe she is interested to do more soul work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, I've bought a number of copies because I want to give it to my grandchildren as well, so that they have it. So it's there in their libraries, and someday they may look at it and understand its value.
Don't you think that most of the people that who participated yesterday are painting themselves? Also are painting?
Many of them.
Yes.
Well,
because it's very hard for someone that haven't tried it to follow. I think it's
that may be true.
Yes.
Yeah, and yeah, I think you're right. But they may also be sculptors, because keep in mind that
yes, of course, yes.
Colleen's studio is basically a ceramic studio. Okay, yes. It's not her paintings per se, although she's really been doing a lot of painting too. And I didn't realize that this exchange with Rocky, Rocky, the woman who told Colleen the secret of the Rocky technique, occurred only 2 years ago.
Oh, in Swedish it's raku. Thank you for. Now I understand what kind. My daughter is doing raku too, but we say raku, and I didn't get it yesterday.
Okay. And so anyway, so I'm thrilled that the the story of meeting Rocky. I now call it Raki, Rocky. I changed the name because I thought when I saw Colleen's work that it looked very Asian to me, and she and I
Yes,
both
because
have,
it's done in a primitive way. You can build outside and burn it. You don't need a real ceramic stove. You
right,
can do it outside with sand and stones and burn it.
well, and
I have-
also the painting, right? The painting can be done without an image to start with. You know, you do it from the unconscious.
Yes.
And
Well, it's interesting because my Christmas present to myself last year was this for my table. And it's a piece of chrysocolla, but someone came up and said, "Oh, look at the ocean crashing up on the rocks."
yeah,
And so there's that kind of, what do you see? And then on the other side, it's polished, and I'm like, "Oh, look at my little Jupiter storm." So I mean, it feels like the stone plays the Rocky game with, what kind of impressionist painting comes up.
yeah. I need to take a bio break, so I'll come back in 1 minute. Jordan, you can go ahead and talk if you want to, but
Well, Ava, that's interesting about your daughter, that maybe when she's older she'll do soul work, but that she's doing her own visioning now.
Yes, and I can. She's of course doing the opposite to her mother. She is not using many colors, and she's told me that all the things should be easy to use, and it's it's her own design, but it's this kind of thinking. It's like she had to mark to me that she is doing her own things.
Yeah, this is useful, as if what you're doing isn't, but what you are doing is.
Yes,
so it's funny that she had to remark to you that.
Yes. It's very clear.
Well, don't we all do that? I mean,
yes.
How to flap the wings and kick yourself out of the nest to go into life.
Yeah. Yes, but I can't stop thinking about sometime in her life, maybe it will show up that she also get this kind of need to express something from the inside, from her inside, and that was so important for me to see Colleen's authentic work, really, because it goes through the screen, even if it's that it's not. It's a sensitivity in the forms that it feels so true.
Yes, it really does come across the screen, and that sensitivity that it's true and it's real.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention that this room used to belong to my mother-in-law as her bedroom. And so I actually did that painting there, which is a painting of the scene across the river from us. But that's why I have this lovely feminine color behind me. Although I like the color too. And
it's like a good sherbet. I mean, it's like a raspberry, or I like the color.
Yeah. And
it's not mauve. It has a sweetness to it.
Yes, it does. So I wanted to go back though for a minute on what Jung was about, because he, of course, did a lot of painting. And about the time he was writing the Red Book, he had this voice come to him, which was the voice of Maria Malzer, was one of his colleagues at the time. or actually one of his analysts at the time, who later became a analyst herself. And I believe she was a nun, a Dutch nun, Maria Maltzer. But anyway, it was her voice, and he was looking at a piece of art, and the voice said, "This is art." And Jung got angry and said, "No, this isn't art." And because he had this clear vision, even at that point, that the paintings that are in the Red Book, for example, and he did many other paintings over his lifetime, were not for art. They were for learning something about himself and learning something about psychology. And the issue with the Red Book was that it happened at a time when he was going through a midlife crisis, having broken up with Freud. And Freud was quite a reductionist, and by that I mean quite a rationalist. And so he had come at psychology in the way a philosopher would do, in a very rational way, whereas Jung realized that the irrational is important. And so the Red Book is his moment of turning away from rationality, which was, for this period from late 1913 until August 1st, 1914, was the time when first he thought maybe he was going crazy himself. And so that the black books are his clinical notes on that process. But then, and most of it, 80% of the Red Book takes place in this 10-week period, from Christmas Day 1913 until early March of 1914. And so Jung then used that as the prima materia, the opening information for his own life. It informed his own life, really, for the rest of it. And as he said, it was more than one lifetime's work to do what came forth, which burst forth at that time. And so by the time of his death, 50 years later, nearly 50 years later, although he had obviously done it in such a way that people would see it, he spent 15 years actually writing in the Red Book, the folio version of the Red Book, his Red Book. And so he obviously thought that it might be published someday because of the way he went about it. He went about it with great care and pasting things in. You could think of it as a kind of scrapbook of his life, at least up until that point, until 1928. When Richard Wilhelm came with The Secret of the Golden Flower, and it made it so he couldn't go back to that work. And so then 33 years later, after Wilhelm, near his death, he was very conflicted about whether to publish it, because he said, who would understand it? And probably in 1961, when he died, people wouldn't have understood it. And so it's the brilliance of Sono Shamdasani who translated it and insisted on it being published, and then worked on it for 13 years, and then subsequently worked for another decade on the black books, that we have it at all. Okay. And so now, I wouldn't say the fullness of time, but human beings having gained more knowledge, more than 60 years after his death, we can look at the Red Book and at least have some idea of what was happening with Jung back then. Obviously, if it had been published in 1961, it would have been difficult to gain traction and have people understand it. And even Jungian analysts would not have understood it. And I do recall 15 years ago, analysts who claimed to be Jungian having the folio edition of the Red Book on their shelf, but having never read it. Okay, and John Jackson at one point said he knew analysts who had been analysts for 40 years who had never read it. This was about a decade ago. And so now we know
it's so rich. Excuse me.
Sure.
It gives so much. His painting, it's like a feeling that for me at least it stay with me, and it's growing. It's like feeling his body in some way. It's embodying this concept of embodying, but it's his soul. And I'm so thankful that I have had the opportunity to look at it, even if it's just I haven't bought the book, but I have his colors. You had YouTube about with Tim about the colors, and it's so he had. It's such a, what is the word? Gediget. It's because the colors, the quality of the color, and he has, I feel he put in his soul in every piece of it, and so generous. Yes, I'm so glad to have this.
Yeah, have experienced it, and
yes.
And it's an experience that we're sharing at this very moment. And so in that way, we can share it with others for many years, because I assume that YouTube isn't going to take these things down, because they make money off the videos that we create.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting.
It stays so much stable. The pictures for me is so much more than words.
Oh yeah, you there's no way that anybody can appreciate what Jung was feeling, but he was communicating with us, no doubt about it, in his paintings. And just with my vision of America, if I described some process that I was doing, but to understand my vision of America, you'd have to have me explain every little mark that I've put on those paintings. And
do you intend to do it? Explain it?
No.
Do you think you can do it yourself? Even put words to everything?
Well, I could put words to a lot of it, but I do not intend to. And the reason is because this is my vision of America.
Yes.
And I'm choosing to communicate it through these paintings. Okay. And people will either grok it. By grok, I mean understand it at a visceral level, or they won't. I can't change that. I mean, I didn't like Pollock for the longest time. I mean, until 95. So how old was I? I was 49 years old when I saw this Pollock in real life. And the same thing is true of Monet. My mother-in-law loves Monet, and she has a number of prints of Monet in this apartment where Debbie and I now have our office because she's moved up to our apartment. But it's like seeing a Monet in a postcard. You can't possibly appreciate it. Okay, it's just impossible to appreciate it. And Pollock strip paintings are the same. If you have a postcard of a Pollock painting, you don't. There's no way you could appreciate it properly. But when I went to the Walters Museum in Baltimore one time and saw it for an official Monet exhibit, and I was decapitated. I mean, the Monet put paint on his canvases 1.5 inches thick, which you can't possibly appreciate. And what that means, the significance of that, you can't even possibly appreciate it unless you see it in real life, physically see it. And then you can appreciate it. I mean, the same is true of the Mona Lisa, of course, and many other famous paintings. But Pollock was the same way. I said, "Oh, geez, a kindergartner can do that." Well, they might be able to approximate it, and as Jung said, we spend our whole life trying to get back to where we were when we were in kindergarten. Right, the divine child.
Well, and then because you were connected then. I mean, it reminds me of a little girl. I think she must have been 5, I guess. And this is last spring out on the plaza here. And she was walking with her dad, and her hands straight up because she's small. And her dad had to be 6'8" or something. So, he's this giant walking with his daughter. And you can tell he's frustrated. And you see her tug on his arm. And she goes, "What is it?" I mean, she could feel it, "What is it? Is it the shopping?" And he said, "No, it's the wind." And the thing is, it was really calm, and then there would be like 30, 35 mile an hour gusts. It was one of those weird days where the wind was very staticky. And he said, "No, it's the wind." She goes, "Oh, that's okay, Dad. Nature's just having to breathe a lot harder to birth spring." So, I was like out of the mouth of babes, and it's like I will never forget that because it's so wise. So connected.
There's an interesting conversation going on YouTube where Michelle said, "I've discovered sewing. I like the scissors and then pinning everything together again. Yesterday I used a stapler. It was awesome." And State of Awakening commented, "It's a Rorschach test. It is life-changing to realize that everything we encounter in life carries the same effect. Relationships, social structures, ultimate meaning all function in the same way."
Good point.
And then they go on, "I feel that no older and more mature, I feel that the older and more mature we get, the easier it is to switch from an intellectual means of perception to a heart center form of perception. In other words, we gain an emotive means of seeing." Well, I think that's a profound statement.
I think it is too. And I think that's also expressing the maturation, leaving the nest. the child becomes the parent of the adult. You know, you're not answering to anyone. And I think then what happens is you can listen to your heart because you don't have to explain it.
Right.
You know, I don't need permission to go to the pool or listen to my heart. I'm going swimming, and this is what my heart says. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not asking for permission anymore. So I think that is that's an evolved, that comment really expresses I think the nature of maturation, that isn't a getting more. I think it's discovering more naturally who you are actually,
Well,
without
and
the covers and the personas and the cloaks.
well, and as I see this emerging in my students, what I see in these 13 and 14-year-old kids is they're at the stage between childhood and young adolescence, basically. And they're resisting the idea that they have to grow up. You know, they're smart enough to know as children that growing up ain't going to be fun. Right.
Yeah.
And so they're resisting growing up, and yet that's what we have to do in order to teach these young people how to live in society, because if we don't, in 5 years they'll be dead from drug overdoses and from other causes that they are starting to see the drug culture, certainly. And we now have legalized marijuana, so we have people complaining that kids come in with smelling of marijuana and so on. And they're naturally, as on their children's side, they're naturally resisting growing up. And I'm saying, but you have to take responsibility for your own life. That's why we're here, to teach you that lesson, if none other, that you have to learn to take responsibility for your life. And
that reminds me actually of Freud and Jung, the break, because Freud's all about reductionist, rational, intellectual. He prudishly got stuck on sex. I mean, it's all about sex drive or not, which is just a shame and guilt land. And Jung instead chose life and the sex drive and the creative drive and moving forward. So from Freud, it was this sexual morals and ethics of right and wrong, which is kind of, you need to crack the egg in a way. And it sounds like kind of a hassle, but Jung chose life in its fullness and sense to nonsense rather than right and wrong. And I think the experiential part with Jung kind of expresses what you're talking about. And when we say you have to grow up and there's a discipline and responsibility, it sounds like a hassle and it sounds boring unless you choose to do that with your own life. And I think then there's an honesty to how you can experientially live everything into being.
Yeah. And just as you were talking, I found the Rocky that I did with 650 kids. That this was, I used as my tool, 650 children. And so I'm going to share that now, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, there it is. It's 24 feet long and 42 inches high, and it has inputs from 650 children in it. And each child was given 1 minute to make their mark on this. I didn't just let them paint for hours, because that would have been just mud. But I let each child paint for 1 minute. And afterward, we went through it, and I had the children find images in this Rocky. And we found 305. I estimate that there actually are over 1,000 images in this piece. So just for scale, this is my fellow art teacher. Let me see if I can get it to merge here.
That's a protection from dog addiction. I think if they get this feeling of participation in meaningful things, and they have a place on.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see this because I'm having trouble expanding it for some reason. Just a minute. I think I'm going to have to stop the share and then I can maybe expand it again.
It's so tragic that Freud is accepted, and in Sweden it's even hard for Jungian analysts to have it's very low. I think it's 6 Jungian therapists working in Sweden. So they had to move to Berlin.
Right. So you can see the difference in quality. The school that I was teaching in last year is wonderful because its walls are covered with murals, but you see these murals are pictographic. They're objective, and they're not alive compared to this Rocky that we did. And so here I am holding it up with my colleague who helps me get the children, corral the children. She was an art teacher too. And so you can see that the piece is really alive. And here it is a close-up, a more close-up, so you can see and see some of the images in it. That's me as a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps. That's a different story entirely. That was career day, but I didn't necessarily want to share that. But what I do want to share is one other thing, if I can find it here, which I have. And so at the end of the school year, the principal allowed us, or the assistant principal said she wanted to use it as the backdrop for the 5th grade graduation. So you can see this whole gym, how large it is, and that 24 feet is just here in front.
Oh.
And so the 5th graders who were graduating had this piece behind them. Only a few of them had it behind them because it just got swallowed up by the nature of the room. But here you can see that other mural that they have in the school, and it's really a unique school in that way, that they have many murals in it, which I love that about this school.
It's interesting.
Go ahead.
It just struck me. I just looked over at the screen, looked over at my PDF copy of the Red Book here. It came to me. It's like, it says, "You torment me awfully." Wait, hold on. "No, I will not be unjust," I replied, "but give me what belongs to me and beg for what you need from it. What is it? Speak." And what's interesting, primarily today, you've spoken in images. We stayed with the art, and we stayed with the kaleidoscope, and we stayed with 2 kaleidoscope. And so in a sense, I think today has been a field trip with speaking in the visual language. And I think that's important, that we, instead of right and wrong, discipline and making progress. I feel the progress today was the beautiful sense and nonsense of stop, get out of the car, go explore. And you spoke visually today. And I think that's a gift that we stopped to smell the roses in the Red Book, so to speak.
Right. And that's what Jung said. He said, I speak in images. He wrote in images too. Each paragraph is an image, according to Edinger. And we think in images. People don't understand that, but we think in images. Just reflect upon that everything you think, you're having an image of something. Even if you're seeing words on a page, you're seeing an image. It's a word is only a symbol for what's behind it. And so
Your video froze right after a word is only from an image behind it.
I guess I lost you for a minute there.
Yeah, you froze right after you said a word is only a symbol for what is behind it.
Yeah, and so for me as a hyper intuitive, when I'm reading a novel, I don't see the words, I see a movie. I see the movie, literally. And then very often I'm disappointed when somebody actually makes a movie of the novel that I've just read.
It's funny that I always say, people are like, oh, the book was better. And I'm like, the book was never better. Because as a creative, I'm like, I'm sitting there reading and here comes the images and I'm composing all these scenes in my mind. I'm like, that's work. So I'd rather see the movie and just have it handed on silver platter. So I don't have, that to me is relaxing. So I think it just depends on your perspective of, book versus movie. But to me, the visual is always better.
Yeah. So there's a little exchange going on YouTube, but Dionysus says, imagine an apple. Well, each one of those words has an image behind it. Okay, imagine. Okay, all right. Well, what do you think of when you think of the word imagine, right? What's behind it? Then an also represents the number one in this case. Imagine one apple. And then an apple, all of us have a different vision of an apple, from an orchard to an apple on our plate to apple pie, you name it. And so, my favorite example is imagine the elephant in the room, right? Or imagine an elephant, or you don't even have to say the words imagine, just say the word elephant, and we all have an idea of what an elephant looks like, right? And so it could be quite different. I just want to see if I have my prop. I don't. I have a prop for kidding beer, and it shows on every bottle of kidding beer, it shows an image of a kidding, which looks like maybe an oriental version of a dragon. But kidding in Japanese actually means giraffe. And so when people made it to Japan and were describing what a giraffe was hundreds of years ago, by the time it got to Japan, this is what a giraffe looked like. And
it has a 40-foot long neck, and it's
right. And so it's quite unique. Let's see.
Well, that reminds me of the cartoon with two brontosaurus dinosaurs with the big long neck, and one of them has a tie right up here, and one of them has a tie down by the body. And it's like, now this is a worthy argument.
Yeah, I actually have it. While you were speaking, I looked it up. So let me show you what a kidding looks like, because kidding is probably the most popular beer in Japan, but right over Kirin Ichiban is this image, which has been on Kirin since forever, Kirin beer, and it literally means giraffe beer. And this is what a giraffe looked like to ancient Japanese. You know, I don't know how long ago this image was conjured, but it's quite different from the actual animal.
Yeah, and there are no spots, and yeah.
So anyway, so we got absolutely no forward progress on the Red Book today.
And like I said, we spoke visually. So
right.
I think that was, we paused and had a scenic overlook into what the whole Red Book is about, and it's visual speaking.
Well, and let's go back to the Jaffe's original statement. The whole purpose of Jungian psychology, Jung's whole psychology, is to make accessible to us the healing power which resides in our unconscious.
Right.
Okay. And so the healing power is in us. We just have to find a way to get to it. Now, over the millennia, many people get to it by religion. Of any religion will do. You know, if the religion has stayed around, chances are they have a way that works to get to the unconscious in a certain way. We can't say which way works better than another way. But they certainly, religions certainly are gateways to the unconscious. And so, and they are also gateways to the collective unconscious. And so when people say prayer, or let's get lots of people to pray, okay, most rationalists would say, you know, what's that going to do? You know, but the reality is it actually does make a difference in the collective. And so
it also helps fill the universe with more silence in a way that cuts out the chatter.
Yeah.
So that you see more clearly the divinity exists just in life.
Yeah. And so this is why we've come around by our confluence events. We've now done 2 of them face-to-face, one in Helena, Montana, and one in Mount Madonna, California. Last October, where we've come to realize that these are events through which we are giving people an experience of the collective unconscious, so they can see it for themselves, and then they can leave the conference knowing that they're connected to everyone else in the universe. Right? We're all connected.
Yes.
Just like you know, Michio Kaku says, every atom in the universe is connected to every other atom in the universe. Well,
it's like with the Dalai Lama on his first, old joke is Dalai Lama's first trip to the U.S. and he goes into this local hamburger joint and he's just giggling, and they say, "What?" He said, "Make me one with everything."
Oh, the orange again.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
There is some kind of synchronistic in the synchronistic things in the conversation.
Assuredly.
Now all I want is, instead of an elephant, now all I want is a hamburger. So it's like So I did it to myself. Don't think about a hamburger. Uh-oh.
Exactly.
So I'm like, okay, no bread, no.
And meanwhile, I've been forbidden hamburger, not by any stricture whatsoever, except that I was bitten in 2013 by a Lone Star tick, and it changed the enzymes in my blood such that I can no longer eat animal meat. I can't.
Oh, wow.
Nothing. I haven't had a hamburger except as a vegetarian hamburger since then.
Wow.
How could it
That's,
be? No, no, it's this carnivore diet with Jordan Peterson, his family, and so on. How could
Mhm.
it be the opposite for you?
Well, it hasn't been consciously engaged in. I was in 2013. I ate hamburgers all my life, um, and then in 2013, I was starting to get these terrible rashes around my belt line and on my feet, and I hadn't quite realized yet that uh, they happened on days that I had a big McDonald's hamburger. Um, and every day that I had one in 2013, um, what happened was about 4 or 5 hours later, I would start to get these rashes. And uh,
Oh,
I couldn't figure it out at all. And I went to Dubai one time, and I guess this was in June or so, and I had my last prime rib of my life, and I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and my skin was raised about an inch from my neck to my knees. My skin
wow.
oh,
had turned red, and it was all puffed up. And
oh,
so, fortunately, I have a friend who's a physician in the U.S., and for him it was like 5 o'clock at night. So I called him and I said, and I took a picture of myself literally and sent it to him and said, "What's going on here?" And he said, "Do you have any Benadryl?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Take two and call me back in a half an hour." So,
Anaphylaxis. Uh,
pardon?
the anaphylaxis, total reaction.
And so I did that, and it stopped getting worse. And so he said, "Take two more." And so I took two more. And of course, now I've had four Benadryls, which caused me to go to sleep. But I woke up at 9 in the morning, and this was entirely gone. The rash was entirely gone. And I still didn't know what was causing it. And I came back to the US, and um, I had a Lebanese dinner, a shawarma, one day, and I wasn't even getting it down. I was literally taking a bite of it, and it was coming back out immediately. And and so I just took that dinner and packed it up and took it into the allergist and said, "Here, something here is causing me to react." And so she tested it, and sure enough, I had allergy to beef. And then we found out that it's allergy to all animal meat. And so,
Oh, interesting. Because that's funny that Ava, you brought up the Jordan Peterson and the carnivore diet, and
yeah.
in November I decided to do the carnivore diet for a month, and then stayed on it through most of December. Christmas dinner was different. I had some potatoes and coleslaw stuff, but no plants. And now it's interesting. I mean, people are like, "What about your veggies?" I'm like, "They're not vegetables; they're plants, and I don't eat plants anymore." So it's like, it's interesting because how a system can be different,
Yeah.
and you bitten by a tick and the enzymes change. I had Lyme's in 2016, and I had it for probably, I guess, 90 days. Every morning I would have hot sweats from like 9:30 to 10:30 when I was in the office, and they would go away. And fortunately, I noticed this big bullseye rash on the back of, like, 5-inch diameter on the back of my calf one morning, and there was no pain to it. But just, coming out of the shower, drying off, I looked down and it's, oh, what a blessing in disguise. Now I know. So I went and got tested, and that was that. I'm just glad my enzymes didn't change like you with the Lone Star tick. So
yeah, it's a certain type of tick. It's not the one that gives you Lyme disease.
Right.
It's this tick that has a white star on its back.
Yeah.
That did that to me. But anyway, it's been wonderful to have you all with me today. We will try to restart this with Jung's soul arguing with him over his precious jewel.
And gold. Yeah.
We'll
continue with the tantrum next week.
We will try next week, and maybe there'll even be an update on my vision of America, which,
cool.
as I said, it doesn't bear description. And I do recall Jordan Peterson. He went to an all meat diet. Is that right?
Yeah, it's the carnivore.
Yeah.
Where it's only meat, salt, water, and dairy. I mean, I use heavy whipping cream for my creamer in the coffee, because half and half it's watered down and it has carbs.
Mm-hmm.
Primarily, my weight loss was cutting carbs out,
mm-hmm.
and
mm-hmm.
I didn't realize every day having a roast beef sandwich with sourdough bread, and maybe toast in the morning, bread. And I didn't realize how much bread I must have, been just normally, bread's on a sandwich, bread's on toast, it goes with eggs, you mop up the yolk, and
mm-hmm.
It's interesting how accustomed you get to not noticing how much of something you're having.
Yeah.
And cut that. I mean, to me, 2 months in, I lost 56 pounds.
Wow. Sure.
I mean,
that's great.
My body's self-regulating. And so for me, the carnivore diet is, honestly, it didn't change much. It just cut the bread out, because it wasn't even having much pasta. And so
this epidemic of the Lone Star tick has now spread throughout the East Coast of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
It was first discovered in about 2009 at the University of Virginia, where
mm-hmm.
people were coming in with this experience. And fortunately, the physician's assistant I work with had read an article about it and seen an article about it, and that explained it. So,
well, I remember the whole Lyme's map on the East Coast when I got it, and I realized the whole East Coast was just this big red series of dots. It's like 60 to 80% chance if you get bit that you're probably going to get it. So and the Lone Star different. So
right. So I'm just repeating these links for Colleen's book and for her interview, which was yesterday, and it was a marvelous interview, hugely loving, as many people observed that it was filled with love, and so I hope you all can watch that interview, and then I've given you the link to where you can buy her book, because it's really worth your time. If you want to, it presents, and Colleen talks about it as if it's an art book, but it's really an amazing psychology book, and very valuable to any of us who are working with Jungian psychology, as of course she has done for the last 60 years or so.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, Ava, thank you so much for being with us today. You brought so much to our conversation, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
So
thank you.
And I have to say, your English is just fine.
Yeah, your English is quite fine. In fact,
I think you're more articulate than a lot of native English speakers that I know.
Absolutely.
That's kind.
And meanwhile, although I keep talking about the Dutch part of my family, the Swedish part of my family is just as strong. My paternal grandmother was Swedish
Oh,
and
uh-huh.
or was of Swedish descent and talked about all her Swedish culture as well.
Oh,
Mhm.
And so I'm just as Swedish as
as
I
I
am.
am, of course.
Well, I don't know. I
Maybe
don't know
I'm
if
more Russian. I
maybe
don't know.
not, because you might have two grandparents who are Swedish, but I only had one.
Okay.
I'm I'm part of the Heinz 57 varieties
Uh,
with so anyway, my DNA analysis said Northern Europe is basically what my ancestry is going back.
Oh, oh,
As you know, it identifies Wales, which is my maternal grandmother, and um, the Pennsylvania Dutch, which is my maternal grandfather. And the Pennsylvania Dutch are actually Pennsylvania Deutsch, which is German, of course.
oh. Oh, I saw an interview you did a talk with Paul Vanderklay once. Do you remember? It's a few years
Paul
ago.
With
Vanderklay, yeah.
who?
Paul
Oh,
Vanderklay.
Vanderklay. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he has been participating in this little corner, they call it, with this meaning crisis discussions, Jordan Peterson, John Verweke, and Jonathan Pashot, and so on.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting now when it has been a few years, 5 years maybe, Paul Vanderklay, that is a Baptistic reformer format
Hmm.
priest or a pastor.
Yeah, he's a pastor.
He,
Yeah.
yes, and he is so good to translate between the academical, the university uh, language and a more uh, Christian evangelistic Lutheran
Yeah.
culture where I
Yeah,
am
I
grown up.
I actually offered to Paul to be our keynote speaker at our first conference back in
Oh, oh,
2022. I asked him to be our keynote speaker, but he didn't feel he was connected enough to the Jungian world to do
mm,
it. And
yeah,
I was trying to have him make the leap a little bit. And
yes,
I
yeah.
I had
He's
a
so open. He's so open. His wife is working in Waldorf school and so on.
mhm,
It's so fantastic,
yeah,
uh, and he's so generous.
yeah,
It's so kind and open and giving. I
yeah.
don't know the word.
He and I both started about the same time. I stopped having a financial interest in my web work, and so I I didn't do what Paul did, but he and I both started our YouTube channels at about the same
Okay,
time.
okay,
And I think he's gained much more popularity because he's focused on Jordan Peterson. I sort of moved away from Jordan Peterson because
yes,
I finally found him too Freudian, too much of a
yeah, yeah,
rationalist. Um, and I mean, he often drops Jung's name, but I don't think he has grokked what Jung was about, really. Um, he
and
wants,
he had to tune in to his this kind of um, he had to fit in to his university.
oh, assuredly, yeah, and he had that huge physical problem, which nearly killed him.
Yes, yes.
And
So dramatic.
and I wanted to debate him and discuss him, but then discuss with him, and many of my followers have urged that, but I haven't been able to find a way in. I wrote to him a couple of times, but he never responded, and I guess he's
And now
too big.
he's in, yes, in Daily Wire, and he's but Paul, when the client, you need to introduce him in what this kind of artwork. He isn't oriented that in that way.
Yeah, so
I
maybe
feel it's
you feel
it,
he's not wired for art.
he 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 isn't oriented in this kind of work that the Kathleen
Yeah.
presented, and it's a little bit because he has started these estuary groups, and I have been participating uh,
In his
that
estuary,
kind
yeah.
of, yes, and that's just talking, and I feel it's, of course, it's different person, it needs different kind of things, but I I can't express, but because I have my experience of what dream work and artwork have uh, meant for me, and I think there must be many more. We don't just need the church and the rituals, and you know what I mean.
Yes.
We need it, but we need something else, more
Yes.
personal. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I certainly am happy to go back to Paul. I like Paul quite a lot, and I followed his work very closely for about 5 years. I have
Oh,
I have to admit that at the beginning, I hadn't had my full awakening to the extent that I was still angry at Christianity for my
okay.
experience with,
Yeah.
because of my experience with my daughter. I assume you know about
Yes,
that,
yeah,
right?
yes, yes.
And but now I've gone beyond that, and as the Dalai Lama says, beyond religion, and uh, and so I do understand that all religions do the same thing that we're doing, actually,
Yes,
which is
in
opening
some
the
way.
and
I'm gonna have to get going.
yeah, okay, thanks, Jordan.
Thank you.
Right. So I'll just continue with Eva for a moment. So Eva, so anyway, I got beyond religion and could look back at it and see its value. And I also see its uses and abuses. Paul
Yes.
is not an abuser. Paul is a genuine Reformed pastor, a Dutch Reformed pastor.
Yes, yes.
And
yes.
of course, Jung was the son of a Swiss Reformed pastor, and Tim Holmes is the son of a Methodist pastor.
Yeah.
Right. But anyway, that's a good thing for you to bring to my attention. I'm not sure I have much time to chase Paul right now, because
No, you don't have. I just express it because
no, it's a good idea, and please get, if you mention this to Paul, please feel free to mention that I'm open to the idea. I just the last 2 years I've been school teaching in my dotage. I'm now 77 years old, so I'm no longer a globetrotter. I actually have been around the world 75 times in my career.
Okay.
More than probably. And
It's just me thinking about it because when I have participated in, there is
guys small live Zoom chats, and Paul is doing his because he is so good to connect people and communicate in a lovely way.
Yeah, loving way
And
too.
yes, in a loving way. Yes. So it's an open, it's still very open.
Yeah, I think you must know that Paul and I did an interview a few years
looked
back.
at it.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's on the homepage of this YouTube channel, so anybody can see that conversation between Paul and me.
Yes.
And you know, I sort of moved away from that environment partially because of Jordan Peterson being sick and me not wanting to push him in any way during that period. And Paul Vanderklay was very involved with Jordan Peterson. And I sort of moved away from that. I mean, I originally was talking to Paul because I was angry with Christianity, and I was, but
yes, but I felt that you had an open discussion. I felt that you could understand each other very well, and in this little corner of internet, there is a small group of people that is doing book podcasts, reading Barfield, Lewis,
Lewis Carroll,
different kind of, and but they are joking about Jung in between. It's not. There is just a few openly Jungian, and your Paul Vanderklay mentioned, oh, we can see Jungians, but they're just visiting shortly. So I felt a little bit frustrated.
Well, yeah, I mean, Paul, I mean, those guys like John Vervaeke is an example also. John
He is afraid of his dreams. Jordan Peterson is able to take his visions and dreams. He is much more close than John Vervaeke.
And Vervaeke is a philosophy professor, I believe. And what he hasn't grokked yet is that philosophy is all rationality. And it's all logic and rationality.
Exactly.
You know, going back.
The religion that's not a religion from Derrida.
Right. So until we can have a meeting of the minds where there is discussion that crosses over and accepts the fact that there are values. I mean, it's like talking about Colleen and her admiration for the rivers of life for women, where that was, and Hilma Klimt, who were both quite rational, and I haven't been able to have this conversation with Colleen yet, because she is so taken with both Hilma and with that book. And I look at that book and I see both as sort of the emergence of rationality. And we have to have both sides, because I came from the rational side, right? I was a Marine officer. I was a lawyer, an MBA. I ran a business for 40 years, and so all that was rationality, right?
Yes.
And it wasn't until 87, so I was 41 when I discovered Jung, and I discovered it. Well, I had heard his name, of course, but and I've heard of the concept of archetype from my wife before this. But in '87, I was teaching in the graduate school at the University of Maryland. Believe it or not, I was teaching finance at the time. And I had this beautiful colleague who was a brand new PhD, and she was very taken with the Myers-Briggs type indicator. And she wanted to talk about it. And so I kept inviting myself to lunch with her so that I could learn, so that I could also be with this beautiful woman, but also understand the Myers-Briggs. And very shortly after that, on the Marine Corps side, I started to go to these senior schools where they were teaching Myers-Briggs in every one of them. In other words, the senior level officers in the U.S. military, and this happened at the Naval War College, the National War College, the Industrial College of the Armed Forces, and Command and Staff College and the Marine Corps, they all required us to use 1 day of our 10 days of reserve active duty training to study Myers-Briggs. And I'm saying, what is going on here? Why do all the U.S. military require that every senior officer take this? And I started to understand from her that, you know, what it meant, and I've seen, and so I've used it ever since. So that's, you know, going on 40 years now too that I've been doing it. So now I'm actually trying to teach Myers-Briggs in my school to the kids.
Oh, you need to teach me, because I never got this kind of I haven't.
Well,
I haven't got it yet.
I can explain it very simply. Okay.
No, not right now, because I'm too tired. I think I'm too tired.
Yeah. Okay. Well, another time, but it's very simple, and I was able to get through to some of my kids the entire thing in an hour, but I can explain it to an adult in 5 minutes. So we'll do it another time. So anyway, thank you for being here today. I guess
thank you.